good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to today's Postgrad webinar service. Today, we're joined by the University of Law, specifically talking about the SQE, which is qualifying as a solicitor. Now, this is going to be an extremely popular session with loads of potential solicitors and prospective students asking questions about the SQE, what makes it so different and unique to standard programs. And please pop your questions in the Q&A box. We do have, after you hear from a student later on today, a dedicated Q&A session of which you can ask questions about the SQE, what it's like to study, any kind of concerns or issues that you might have. We will be running through as much as possible. If there are any questions around funding, scholarships, anything like that, we will briefly touch upon it, but all the answers to your questions will be on the website. So please head over to them, find out more at the University of Law website. This is the 20th of May 2026. It is live. If you are watching on social media today, please don't worry. Your questions will be answered. They will come through to us, and we'll do our very best to make sure we get through as many of your questions as we can. And if you are watching on demand and you have any questions, also webinars at postgradsolutions.com is the place to email. Now, you will get a certificate of attendance for today's session. Please email with your details, with the session you watched, and we will endeavour to get that over to you in the next 7 to 14 days, which will showcase that you've been watching and that you've got an opportunity to find out more about the University of Law. But for now, over to Hannah. She'll be taking you through the next 30 to 40 minutes. We are then joined by a current SQE student, and I'll be back for the Q&A towards the end. Hannah, over to you.
Gareth, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. My name's Hannah Poulton, as Gareth said, and I am with the University of Law. I'm a programme and student lead with the university, which essentially means I have a role overseeing delivery of the SQE courses, specifically from our Bristol, Exeter and Oxford Brookes campuses. And so I spend a lot of time teaching, but as well as liaising with students and staff around the delivery of the courses. So I've got a good working knowledge of the SQE courses, which I'm here to talk to you about today. And as Gareth said, we are covering the route for qualification as a solicitor following the introduction of the SQE regime by the regulator for the profession, the Solicitors Regulatory Authority. So, just move my slides on. There we go, jumping. If you are new to the University of Law, you don't know much about us, it's useful to start with a little bit of information about us. We have been in legal education and postgraduate legal education for many, many, many years, 150 years this year, in fact. And so we really know what we're doing when it comes to legal education. We've been around a long time. We've trained an enormous proportion of the current legal profession. And that means we have a lot of links within practice and with law firms. And that's important because it continues to shape the development of our courses. We're liaising with practice all the time about what employers want from their future lawyers. But it also means that we have a lot of support from those firms and individuals with them for events that we run. And in particular, we have a really strong employability team that offers a lot of resources and events, activities to help bring on your employability and your prospects as for future legal employment. So we've got a few things on the slide here. The careers service that I've just mentioned is right up there at the top. It's a huge careers service which offers remotely for students across the country and internationally as well. And it's a really big part of what we do. You don't come to us to do these courses to not go into the profession. So we really want to support you and help you to succeed. And you'll see on the slide as well a statistic there for our employment statistics that 94% of our graduates, postgraduates are in employment, legal employment within a very short period of completing their study. In terms of our teaching staff, we are predominantly and all in most cases taught by legal practitioners, so people who have qualified as solicitors and barristers. They know what it takes to be a successful lawyer and they know what the skills are, and they are the people that are teaching you on our courses. We have an enormous alumni network, again, made up by the connections that we have, and that's something that you continue to benefit on even when you've completed your study with us. Okay, so that's a little bit about us. In terms of what this session is going to cover, starting with what the route to legal practice is, particularly after these changes that have come in recent years by the SRA, and so what the regime is that they require you to go on and qualify as a solicitor, a little bit about the types of questions that are at the heart of that, a bit about qualifying work experience, which is one element of that qualification route, and then importantly, a bit about the courses and how they are designed to prepare you for that assessment regime. And as Gareth said at the very end, I'll be handing over to Chloe, one of our current students, who can give you some student perspective and insights. Okay, so starting with the routes into practice. This slide sort of sets out the main elements that we've got, and essentially the SRA, Solicitors Regulation Authority, now says that you have to have a degree level qualification or equivalent, so level 6 equivalent apprenticeship, for example, or SILEX qualification or sufficient legal experience. But that's the starting point. Interestingly, it doesn't need to be a law degree. They're not requiring you to study law as a degree or to study any particular training course at all, but their requirements are centered around 2 stages of assessments called SQE1 and SQE2, and a period of on-the-job training called qualified work experience, 2 years of which. And when you have satisfied those elements, so you pass their external SQE1 examinations and SQE2 examinations, and you complete that period of training, then you can go forward to apply for admission to the role and qualification as a solicitor. So we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail about what this regime is and those elements, and starting with SQE1, we're going to cover the basics of the assessments, what's tested, how, where, when, that sort of thing. So SQE1, starting off, a nice busy slide for you to have a look at here. And this is the stage 1 that the SRA specifies is all about assessing what they call functioning legal knowledge, FLK. And essentially, this is the legal principles across a range of legal subjects that are core to a practicing solicitor's knowledge base. And the SRA classifies or categorizes the broad syllabus that they have into the areas that you can see on the screen, what they call FLK1, and there's a whole bunch of subjects there that you can see, and they all get assessed in one exam on FLK1 knowledge, and FLK2, again, a bunch of subjects that get assessed in one exam on the FLK2 knowledge. And you might, well, I'm anticipating that a number of you will be current undergraduate students, and so the subjects, particularly along that bottom line, contract, tort, public, legal system of England and Wales, criminal law, land law, trusts, will be familiar to you as academic law. And that forms the basis of most law degrees and is very relevant and is examinable by the SRA for qualification. So those of you that are doing a law degree may well already have some or all of that academic legal knowledge. Some of you may not be doing a law degree at all and might be thinking about a conversion course to acquire some of that. The new sort of professional practice subjects that you don't typically get taught on a law degree or conversion are the top line: business law and practice, dispute resolution, legal services, criminal practice, property practice, wills and administration of estates, and solicitors accounts. And essentially that's what we're focusing on when we teach our SQE courses. This functioning legal knowledge content can be covered in standalone courses that are just preparing you for the SQE1 examination, or we also have a longer LLM course, and I'll talk about the courses in a bit more detail later on, which will prepare you for SQE1, 2 and beyond, and so the LLM would cover that. But in terms of the subjects that you're studying, it's exactly the same because it's preparing you for that assessment point with the SRA. In terms of that assessment that you sit with the SRA, you'll see that at this stage 1, SQ1, there are no skills at all, so no practical skills assessed in SQE1, and you are also assessed on ethics and professional conduct, which is pervasive across those 2 exams that you do, and you can see that across the bottom of the slide there. The assessment regime is pretty rigorous, so notwithstanding that you're being assessed on a very broad syllabus across all of these subjects in 2 exams, it's also a pretty intensive exam experience. So there are 10 hours, 12 minutes of assessment for SQE1, which breaks down into 2 days, and each day breaks down into 2 parts. So you have 2 hours 33 in the first session with a break, and 2 hours 33 in the second session. And the format of the exam is something called single best answer questions, which some of you may well already be aware of, or SBAQs. It's essentially like a multiple choice question, but it's a little bit more sophisticated. I've got an example SBAQ to show you in just a moment. But there's 360 of them across all these subjects areas that you can see on the screen across the 2 days. So 180 on day 1 on FLK1, 90 in the morning, 90 in the afternoon, and 180 on day 2, again, 90 in the morning, 90 in the afternoon on the FLK2 knowledge. Okay, so it's a tough exam, but we do have a really strong pass rate. So for January 26, which was the last sitting that the SRA did, the University of Law's pass rate was 76% of those students that were sitting it at their first attempt, which is a fantastic pass rate, particularly compared to the baseline and the SRA statistics for all candidates across England and Wales, which was 58%. So we're really pleased with those statistics and the way that our courses are preparing students to sit this exam. Okay, I'm sure there's going to be questions on some of this, so if I spot some, I'll pick them up, and if not, we'll be picking up questions later on as well. So please, if you've got questions, do just pop them in the chat, because that's what we're here for, to answer some of these. So I mentioned single best answer questions, SBAQs, and my next slide is just explaining a little bit more about what this is, because this is at the absolute heart of how they're examining functioning legal knowledge for SQE1. Okay, so what is a single best answer question? Well, as I said, it's a bit like a multiple choice question. So essentially a question is posed to you and there are options to choose from, but it's a little bit more sophisticated, because in terms of the answers that you're presented with, there may be more than one that's partially correct, but there will be one answer which is the best answer overall. And what they're typically looking to do is not just for you to recount legal knowledge that you've acquired, but actually to apply that to a set of facts. And so in the circumstances, what is the best advice or the best course of action that the solicitor should take? So the way that it's will appear, the way it's framed, and you can go onto the SRA website to see their sample questions if you haven't done this previously and you want to see some example ones of what this means. The way it's structured is in 3 parts. So what we call the stem, which is a bit of information or the factual scenario on which the question's based. So usually it will tell you a little bit about the client or about the person. And then there is a specific question, the operative part of the SBAQ, which is asking you, which is the question that's being posed to you. And as the slide says, this is often phrased as which of the following best describes. There are many other ways in which it can be phrased as well, but it's the crux of what you're answering. And then you've got options, and there's 5 of these that are always labeled A to E. And as I mentioned, more than one of those could be technically or partially correct, but only one of them will be the best answer. So let's have a little example. Got some information on screen for you to read here. So a newly qualified solicitor working in the litigation department is due to meet one of his firm's clients to discuss the client's claim, due to be heard in court next week. The solicitor supervisor is unable to attend the meeting, but has told the solicitor to inform the client that there are no major problems and that the prospects of success are good. On reading through the file shortly before the meeting, the solicitor discovers a costs warning notice from the court. This orders the client to pay security for costs on the basis that its claim has little prospect of success. There is no client letter in the file advising the client of this fact. So clearly this solicitor's been put in a situation where the information on the file isn't quite corresponding with the indication that the supervisor gave them before they left. So which of the following options best describes what the solicitor should do? You've got your 5 options there, A to E, and you can see some of them revolve around attending the meeting, some of them don't. So let's have a quick look through them, and you can have a moment to think what you think might be the best one. So A, do what he's been told to do by the supervising solicitor on the assumption that the client must already know about the cost warning notice as it is on the client's file. B, do what he's been told to do because it is not his file or his client and responsibility lies with his supervisor. C, cancel the meeting, explain to the client that the supervisor will not be able to meet the client due to unforeseen events. D, attend the meeting, tell the client that the prospects of success are not good and insist that the client settle or withdraw the claim immediately. Or E, attend the meeting, explain the costs warning notice to the client and advise the client to consider settling or withdrawing the claim. Okay, so we've got a suggestion there, surely C. What else are other people thinking? There's a range of options there. I think C is certainly quite tempting, isn't it? Because if you don't know what the supervisor, this slightly contradicts what the supervisor said, and if you don't know, that might seem to be the easiest way to just avoid dealing with it right now, and then you can check in with your supervisor. It's actually not going to be the best answer that we've got here because we have certain principles that we have to abide by, and one of those is around honesty and integrity, and so this obviously would have a slight untruth to it and isn't fully consistent with those principles. And this is a good example of an ethics type question. So I mentioned that ethics is pervasive across FLK 1 and 2. This is a litigation based question which falls within FLK 1, but clearly at the heart of this are ethics considerations. And so it's a good example of how ethics is being assessed in that practice context of litigation. Any other brave souls? It's a mean one, isn't it? So the correct answer is actually going to be E, to attend that meeting, explain the warning notice and advise the client to consider settling or withdrawing the claim. I mean, obviously if the solicitor didn't feel competent to do that, that might change things, but we have been told that it is a solicitor, a newly qualified solicitor, and we would expect them to have a competency around that. We've got other ones there. I mean, A, do what he's been told to do. Again, that's slightly problematic in terms of our being honest, acting in the client's best interest, because that's not giving them the information that we know. And we also have principles around giving making them aware of information which is materially relevant to their case, for example. Okay, I'm not going to go through the detail of all of those because you get the purpose of this is to give you an example of a question, which hopefully that does. So I'm going to move on to think about SQE2 now. So SQE1 is functioning legal knowledge. SQE2 then is where the SRA assesses your practical legal skills. And again, it's, oh, sorry, I had a slide there with the answers on. Just give you a moment to have a look at that there. So best interest of the client to know the true prospects of success. Solicitor should make the client aware of all information material to the matter. Okay. So SQE2, practical legal skills. Interestingly, the FLK that you're assessed on in SQE1 continues to be examinable in SQE2 and still carries 50% of the marks. So it's really important. And your stage 2, your SQE2, is made up of 16 assessment stations. You're assessed in 6 different skills. 2 of them are oral skills, interviewing and advocacy, and 4 of them are written skills. You can see there case matter analysis, legal research, legal writing, and legal drafting. But for each of those skills, you're assessed on that skill more than once in more than one practice context. So there are 2 interviewing and advocacy assessments each in different practice contexts, and 3 of each of your 4 written. So that makes up the 12 assessment stations overall. And the 2 oral skills assessments are, you have the 4 assessments across 2 half days. And then for the written assessments, you're assessed on those across 3 half days. So each written skill is assessed in half a day in a different context, and then again the following day in a different context, and then again in a different day. I saw a question there about how, and the exact format of the assessment is different for each of the skills. So interviewing, as you might expect, you are required to sit down with a client, to take information from them, to provide some provisional advice, and to write up an attendance note. Advocacy, you're required to attend a hearing and make submissions to a judge or an assessor who's acting in the capacity as a judge. And legal writing, you might be asked to draft all or part of a letter. Drafting, you might be asked to draft all or part of a document, or amend a document, or critique a document. Legal research, you'll be analysing some resources and providing an answer to some questions. And case matter analysis is, again, reviewing portfolio of papers and providing an analysis of that. So each of the kind of the core skills, which are really important for a solicitor starting out to be able to do, and are at the heart of the legal work that we do. And they're intended to simulate the sorts of tasks you'll be asked to do in practice. You're assessed at newly qualified solicitor level. And on the slide there, you can see, scenarios based on tasks completed by solicitors, tested over the 5 half days I mentioned. They're assessed in the different practice contexts, and those practice contexts are also set out on the slide there: criminal litigation, dispute resolution, property law and practice, wills and probate, business law. So it doesn't matter what type of lawyer you're thinking of being. If you're going to be a corporate lawyer, you're still going to need to pass these SQE2 assessments in these practice areas. And it's not a light assessment route that the SRA sets for students like yourselves who are thinking about this for qualification into the profession. Also wanted to mention on this one then, just looking at what's ahead on the next slides as well, the pass rate for this one, again, is high and higher indeed, and that's indicative and reflective of the fact that students that go on to sit SQE2 have already passed SQ1 and have got that FLK knowledge behind them. So our last statistics for this was a 91% pass rate for those sitting at first attempt, again compared with a 79% for the average SRA statistics. So some really strong assessment, some really strong results there, and we'll talk a little bit about the courses and how we prepare our students for sitting these assessments in just a moment. Before we do that, I've got one more slide on the SRA assessment regime, and with important information around costs and dates. Now, one thing to be aware of is that the SRA requires you to sit these assessments as part of its qualification route, and that is a fee that you pay to them for sitting the assessments. It's completely independent of any fee that you might pay for a training course. So if you come onto one of our courses, there will be a separate course fee for the tuition and the materials that you receive, but that will be different. That's separate to this cost, and that's something, of course, to factor into your own planning of like how and when and where you might want to be studying and then ultimately sitting assessments. You can have reasonable adjustments in these assessments with the SRA if that's something that provision that you've had for assessments previously, or indeed your circumstances change and you need to have adjustments for whatever reason. That's something that you can apply for through apply to the SRA for. through the booking portal that you set up with them. I didn't mention already, but you have to pass SQE1 before you can go on and sit SQE2. That's one of the specific requirements of the SRA. Overall, this regime is intended to be a little bit more flexible in terms of what and when you do, particularly in relation to the qualifying work experience. But that is one of the stipulations that they have, that you have to pass SQE1 before you go on and sit SQE2. And you get 3 attempts at these assessments in a 6-year period. You can see on the slide the fees, and for SQE1 and it's £2,006. These are the fees that are from 2026. For SQE2, the fee is a bit higher, just over 3,000, bringing the overall cost for the assessment alone to just over £5,000. Now, importantly, you can see the resit fees there are essentially the same cost again. So you pay the full assessment fee if you do need to sit the assessment again. So we do call these high stakes assessments because the fees associated with them are high. The resit fees are the same again, and you also have limited sitting opportunities. So SQE1, you can only sit it twice a year currently. That's in January and July. There are 4 sittings a year for SQE2, but still relatively limited. And of course, you've also got restricted attempts. So they're high stakes assessments. And that's one of the reasons that, for the students that run our courses, we work with them quite closely and give advice as to whether we think students are indeed ready to sit. And we have certain analytics which are available to us to help inform that. So we're very transparent with students about where we think their performance is at and whether that is equating to a likely or an unlikely success outcome at the assessments. The other information that's just on that slide, which I haven't covered yet, is the locations where you can sit the assessment. So SQE1 is much more flexible. Basically, you sit that in a Pearson VUE test centre, so where you might sit your theory driving test, for example. And so there's locations across the country where you can register to sit those. The oral assessments, the 2 half days that you do for that, are much more restricted, and they're currently only running in 4 city venues at the moment. So London, and then also Manchester, Birmingham and Cardiff that you can see on the slide there. Before you sit any assessments with them, you have to register with them and create an account. And that's one of the formalities. And they have a particular process in terms of when you can register. So they have a booking window that opens a certain period before an assessment sitting. And you can express an interest of where you want to sit. There's lots more information around that on the SRA's website. Okay. So again, if I've missed questions, we will pick those up. But I want at this point to talk about qualifying work experience, which is the final element that the SRA requires for qualification. And there's been changes in the qualification regime in recent years. So this slide is just summarising those really, because the old route used to refer to a training contract. You would do the legal practice course followed by a 2-year training contract, usually spending 6 months in 4 different departments, although some firms would work that a little bit differently. But there was a requirement to sit in different practice areas, and a requirement for one of them to be litigation-based or a contentious seat. And you would spend time under the supervision of a qualified solicitor. We've moved away from that, but there are still a lot of parallels, and actually a lot of law firms are still operating their training opportunity in a very similar way, which is why I'm mentioning it at the slide at this time. So in terms of the new route for SQE and the requirement to do qualifying work experience, it's still a period of legal experience and working and doing, providing legal advice, working with legal clients to develop the competencies that you need as a solicitor. And it's 2 years in length or full-time equivalent. So if you're doing it on less than full-time hours, it would be over a longer period of time, for example. You don't have to do it in multiple places, and actually there's a maximum now of 4 different places, and you can do it with more than one provider. So there's a lot more flexibility involved in the new route in terms of who you do it with, how long you spend with a particular provider, in terms of the order in which you do it. So the training contract always had to be after or running alongside the LPC. Now qualifying work experience that you might have undertaken prior to your study and your SQE exams can count. As you can see on the slide, doesn't need to be in England and Wales. Experience can be overseas, although you do need to check the details out of that quite carefully. Can be taken before, during, or after your QWE, as I said, and the 2 years don't even need to be consecutive. It can come from paid or unpaid work, and I've got a slide in a moment on that. So there's a lot more flexibility around how and where you can acquire your qualifying work experience. The key thing is that you are getting the opportunity to develop competencies which somebody's prepared to sign off for you. But the reality is that a lot of law firms are still offering or requiring their employees and their candidates to do something which resembles the old training contract. So quite a formal, rigid 2 years when you first join them, and they'll sign you off at that point. So that's sort of the reason for mentioning that. So this slide is just giving you a little bit more information about the type of work that can count. So I said it could be paid or unpaid. So it could be on a training contract or working as a paralegal with an employer, but also it can cover placements on law degrees, voluntary work, charitable organisations, law clinics, citizens advice bureau, that type of thing. The next slide is essentially sharing what the SRA specifies your qualifying work experience is like to look at, and the sort of the requirements that it needs to tick. And essentially it needs to have been in legal services. It needs to have related to kind of real life legal services provision and enabled you to develop the competencies that the SRA specifies. Say it shouldn't be more than 4. And it will need to amount to 2 years or full-time equivalent. And ultimately, needs to get signed off. So the qualifying work experience is all about the opportunity to develop the competencies of a newly qualified solicitor. And so typically, you'd expect that to involve interaction with clients, opportunities to, is having the opportunity to see solicitors working in practice and to develop your own competencies in terms of the work that you might be doing on a case file. Ultimately, it has to be signed off by either the designated person within a law firm, a solicitor in the firm, or a nominated person from outside the firm who's had the experience of seeing the work that you have completed. Okay, so that's a bit of a whistle stop of qualifying work experience, and brings me now to talk about our actual courses and what they look like and how they're structured to prepare you for this assessment regime. So we've hinted at some of this already, and the first slide that I've got here is again just summarising that route that you're following. So having some sort of degree level or equivalent qualification and heading to do the SQ1, SQE2 and QWE. And sat underneath that timeline is a box intended to cover the courses. So you can see in the purple, we have a preparation course, SQ1 preparation course, that comes with some exam preparation at the very end of it to prepare you for SQE1. We have a preparation course for SQE2, and in the red box is our LLM course, which includes those preparation courses, but also includes some enhanced content in that red box at the end called SQE+. And the LLM essentially enables us to package these elements together, so you're signing up for a bigger program, which will ultimately give you an LLM award at the end of it, rather than just accessing a preparation course to sit the exams. And we offer that as a product because it's attractive for a lot of students, because there is student loan finance available for it if it's your first master's in the UK. So let's just take the different elements. So the SQE1 preparation course is that you could do as a standalone course is exactly the same as what you would do if you're doing it part of the LLM. So let's start with looking at that in a little bit more detail. As you can see, that slide at the top is just indicating it's the first part of the LLM or it's as a standalone course. And so, as you would expect, the SQE1 preparation course is focusing on that functioning legal knowledge that you need for SQE1. We do assume that you have already done some prior academic study and that you have got academic legal knowledge in those subjects across the bottom. And the preparation course, the LLM, is focusing on teaching you the professional content in the top line as new content in preparation for the assessment. There's some revision and some touch points on the academic legal knowledge, so it does get worked into the materials, and you can see how it's paired with the new material that we're covering with you. But for the most part, there's no formal tuition of those subjects, and I think that's probably true of most providers. You'd need a much longer course if we were teaching all of that legal knowledge. And that legal knowledge will be a requirement, entry requirement for the LLM, but it isn't for the preparation courses, although of course it's recommended because you're going to need to have that for sitting the SQE1 assessment at the end of it. In terms of a bit about the content, the way we do it, there are manuals that are available to you electronically. You can also buy them hard copies if you want to. The materials include a range of resources and materials and tests. So there's like test your knowledge quizzes, there's practice SBAQs, as you would expect, that are intertwined within each unit of study. And there's sort of like a little series of questions at the end of each unit of study that enables you to see how the material you've covered can be tested by way of a weekly practice test. And there's lots of opportunity for practice questions. So there are mock assessments, and we have an enormous question bank, which we have developed for students, which has literally got thousands of SBAQs across the breadth of the FLK syllabus for you to practice SBAQ style questions in preparation for the assessment. That enables us to use learner analytics to identify where your strengths and weaknesses are, or in particular for you to identify where your strengths and weaknesses are, and you can engage and use that information as much as you wish. But it's an enormous resource with lots of flexibility and data insights available to you to assist with your study and your preparation. So that's a bit about our SQE1 courses, either standalone or within the LLM. Moving on to SQE2, and again, available as a standalone or within the LLM. That's the course that's preparing you for those practical legal skills. So very different in terms of how it's taught and the sorts of questions, much less focus on SBAQs, although you continue to have access to those if you're an LLM student to prepare. And the tasks that you encounter on the SQE2 are much more practical, as you would expect, to enable you to develop these skills. So we can't plug you with skills. It's something that comes from practice. You have to have a go, and you have to reflect, and you have to have another go, and it's about honing and developing the skills in the same way. When you're learning to play a piano, you can't tell someone how to play a piano and then you're grade 8. It's something that you have to practice and do. So the course is designed in that way. It has some introductory sessions to introduce you to the skills and the things to think about when you're attempting them, and then the later units are getting you to engage in your own attempts at these skills in the different practice contexts in which you're going to be assessed in them. It's supported by a workbook with additional materials that you can work your way through in your own time. Again, there are mocks with feedback that you complete, and lots of opportunity to practice and develop those skills as part of the course. Okay. So then That brings me then to the last part of the LLM, if that's the option that you're thinking about. And this slide is summarizing what makes up the SQE Plus. And essentially, the SQE Plus is additional content that goes beyond what the SRA specifies for that qualification route. And there is lots of legal content and legal specialism, which is highly relevant to practice and really valued by law firms, which isn't within the basics of what the SRA specifies. So, for example, all the specialisms like employment, family, advanced kind of criminal, intellectual property, mergers and acquisitions, lots and lots of different areas of law, which may well be already on your radar as something that you're interested in. And as I say, and will be of value to law firms. And there is also an opportunity here for us to develop wider professional skills in you that law firms want and value and want their people starting with them to already have beyond the basic legal drafting, legal writing skills. So the SQ Plus was developed in conjunction with input from the law firms about what they wanted future lawyers to be able to do and when they start with them. And so at the heart of it is some additional black letter law in particular key practice areas of interest. So this slide is summarizing those key practice areas. You'll study 3 of them as part of SQE Plus, and they're broadly categorized into those areas of corporate, commercial, and private client. And essentially, you'll choose 3 across either the corporate commercial groupings or the commercial private client groupings. These are coursework-based subjects, so you submit coursework at the end of the tuition, and it's obviously giving a lot more flexibility for you to choose subjects that align with your preference areas or with your career aspirations. A quick word of warning that not all of them will necessarily run at a particular campus or for a particular start date that you might be looking at. Where our cohorts are smaller, it can be problematic to offer all of them or to offer a viable educational experience, and that's something that we will work with you on. But there's a broad range of 14 there, and there's often the ability to study one online if there is a particular issue. And the other thing to be aware of is that if you've had a particular study pattern across SQ1 and 2, that may well change for SQE Plus, because obviously there's more options there that we're accommodating. So you choose 3 of the key practice areas, and then you can see at the top there's 2 more modules, preparing for practice and additional content. So if I move on to that, the preparing for practice is an additional assessment, coursework assessment that you do on your kind of wider lawyer skills that are being developed through the tuition of your key practice areas. So it's focusing on your commerciality, perhaps legal technologies that have been introduced through the teaching, and other skills around, strategic thinking, for example. There's different skills that will be relevant to different practice areas, but you choose a coursework that's set in one of the 3 practice areas that you're doing, and then you choose one more module, which can either be the business of law module that you can see there, which is a module really designed at developing commercial awareness and lots of really good knowledge there to take forward into future employers around law firms, how they operate, how they work with clients, how the finances of a law firm work, how they position themselves, how they brand themselves, and also things like innovation and legal tech is coming into that as well. Or alternatively, there's an opportunity to do a slightly more, a longer piece of coursework on a sort of more in-depth piece of work where you research and write on a particular area of legal practice, and the set titles that you can choose from to do that. So that's just a bit of a whistle stop. I'm very conscious of timing and where we're getting to. So I'm happy to take any questions that are coming up from that. Perhaps if we at this point hear from Chloe, and then the questions that I'm sure have been flying in, we can pick up as part of the general Q&A. So I'm going to hand over to Chloe. She's a current SQE student with us, and I'm sure she's got lots of interesting things to say. Thanks, Chloe.
Thanks, Hannah. Just making sure that everyone is able to hear me.
Yes, I can.
Yes, absolutely.
Bob, thank you. Yeah, so hi everyone. Nice to meet you. I am Chloe, and I started. Well, I'm a LLM legal practice student at ULaw, and I started the course in September last year. So I have thankfully passed SQE1, and I have just taken SQE2 2 weeks ago, so it is quite fresh in my mind. But yeah, I think I just wanted to give you a bit of an overview of my experience as a student. And I'd like to address 3 different points. So the first one is sort of what a typical day studying for SQE1 and 2 looks like, which are quite different, I think, depending on whether you're prepping for SQE1 or SQE2, just because the 2 exams really test your test very different skills. And so in terms of SQE1, it is quite a content heavy preparation. As Hannah was explaining, there's an assumption that we already know the core academic law, but then we are taught the practical aspect of the law. And even though it is not, I wouldn't say that it is extremely technical knowledge, it is just very heavy and there's quite a lot to go through. So most of my days I spent going through the manuals and practicing SBAQ with the platform that ULaw has available, which is an extremely useful platform. You have thousands of questions that you can practice from, and I think this is kind of the key to success in a way for SQE1, because what I've noticed is that a lot of the questions and the way that the sort of knowledge that it tested is also about recognizing some patterns, because essentially you have a limited amount of knowledge that will be tested, and the questions that come up are kind of formulated in a similar way. It's just like the name of the clients that changes, for instance. So the more you practice, the more you're able to recognize these patterns. And I think that, again, the platform that ULaw has available for all its students is very, very helpful. And during classes, so we have 4 2-hour workshops per week, where it's sort of in person. You can also do it online. And these workshops are quite useful because we kind of just go through the knowledge that we've been asked to study ourselves separately. And then we go through SBAQ questions, but we also have more applied exercises. So it's not only going through SBAQs, and you kind of, for instance, if you're studying property practice and you're looking at a contract to sell a property, you're not just going to do SBAQs, you're going to look at a contract itself. So I think it's a better way to sort of understand the knowledge in the context of how it's used. And yeah, before prepping, when you're kind of in full exam mode, I think I spent most of my days just revising my notes and doing SBAQs essentially. And then in terms of SQE2, again, as Hannah said, it is very much about the skills. So you're not going to be introduced to new knowledge. It's just going to be practice, 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 which again is super useful because I think these exams are quite intense in the sense that you have a very limited amount of time to answer questions, and you have to sort of understand how to go through, read the scenario, understand and pick up all the important bits, and then just write everything up in a very simple, concise, structured manner. And I think the only way to sort of get there and be comfortable with it and to be confident about it is by practicing. So the workshops, I believe we have 6 workshops a week, but they're a little bit shorter. And each workshop focuses on a specific skill. And we essentially just do papers because we already have the knowledge. We've just gone through everything for SQE1, and then we just applied this knowledge by making all these practice questions. So I spent most of my days when I was prepping for SQE2, I kind of divided it into revising all the knowledge and then applying it by making practice questions. And I think ULaw has a workbook where you can have, in addition to all the practice questions that you've done in your prep, as part of the course, there are additional practice questions in the workbooks that you can do yourself when you're preparing. So yeah, and I kind of, because there is this 50-50 split, so 50% of the grade is legal knowledge and 50% of the grade is the skills, I tried to sort of organize my days in that sense. So I would study and revise the content in the morning, and then in the afternoons I would try to do practice questions essentially. And then the second point I wanted to address is whether, which is a lot of people have these questions, is whether you're able to have any commitments on the side. So I think for SQE1, and in commitments I mean part-time jobs and things like that. I think for SQE1, it was a little bit harder for me to do anything in addition to my course, just because it's very short, it's very condensed, there's a lot of things to go through. And I did work as a student ambassador, but I was able to take on less shifts and I didn't really work as much. But I think for SQE2, it's quite different because, again, you don't go through new content. It's more about practice. So I think you do have a little bit more time on the side to work part-time. And because you do have a full sort of month where you don't have classes and you just study, I think it's good to have something on the side just to kind of take your mind off of SQE2 and yeah, just do something else with your time, because I think it sort of helps to have a clear mindset when you're prepping for SQE2, and because of course you've been through a lot already. So yeah, I do think for SQE2 you have a little bit more time to do a part-time job. And then yeah, final point, which is sort of environment in classes and how I was able to connect with my classmates. I think I was very lucky in the sense that we had a really good class, and I think it was super helpful to be surrounded by people that were very, kind of helping each other out. And people engaged a lot in the workshops, and this is something I really encourage you to do, is to make the most of the workshops, because it's such a good way to apply your knowledge, to put yourself in exam conditions. And I think it's probably the best way that you can prepare for these exams, because you need to be in exam conditions. You need to force yourself to work under time pressure, because this is the pressure that you're going to experience during the exams. And yeah, and people were very happy to engage. So it was a good environment despite all the stress that we were going through, but it's definitely doable. And yeah, overall, I think my experience was great with ULaw. Sorry, I might have gone a bit over time, but yeah.
Thanks, Chloe. Okay, so at this point, we're really handing over for questions that you might have.
Excellent. Thank you, Hannah. And thank you, Chloe, as well. It's great that we can hear firsthand from a student, actually. It's very rare that we get that opportunity to hear firsthand about the experiences and not just about the education and also the key kind of intricacies of the differences between SQE 1 and 2 and whether you can work, whether you can have commitments, because that is important, isn't it? So, um, Hannah, if I can come to you to begin with, Chloe, if you can just hang fire there, because there will be some questions
Yeah.
I will fire your way as well. Hannah, I'm going to go through the Q&A if that's okay, and there will be some duplicates in there, but we'll get through it. A student that says, I'm an economist and a researcher, but I'm also interested in legal education. My question is, why do courts delay the decision so much? Why is it not included in the curriculum that there should be no delay in decisions? Um, I think that's quite a strong statement and quite a broad question, but do you want to try and answer it as best as you can?
So this is why do courts delay their decisions in cases that they're
Yeah,
hearing?
so where is it in the curriculum that if they were to delay, what you need to do in that circumstance?
Wow. So I'm gonna issue a caveat straight away that that's not my area. I was
Yeah,
a non-contentious lawyer in practice, and I teach on non-contentious areas of. So, I mean, that would cut in terms of where you would study something that would give you the answer for that. That would be within functioning legal knowledge one,
yeah,
and through dispute resolution. As a subject area that you cover, and so yeah, you usually cover that in the sort of early part of the FLK1 knowledge.
excellent. Okay, that was quite a broad question, and apologies if we've not been able to answer that, but I think that's quite bespoke. Question coming, can I focus on a certain country's legal system? I think you started off the presentation by saying it doesn't matter where you are or where you're intending on going. This would be appropriate for all, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, this the course is focused purely on qualification within England and Wales. So that's what the SRA is specifying. So that yeah, you can study from wherever, and if you had legal work experience, it can count towards the qualifying work experience that would make satisfy the SRA's requirements for practice in England and Wales. But that's where the course and what we've been focusing on today.
Excellent. And can I choose the disciplines I want to do? There'll be many students that they know they want to be a solicitor or lawyer. They're not
Mm.
100% sure the exact discipline they want to go down. Can they choose during their studies?
Yeah, and they don't need to choose. So the studies, the SRA says that you have to be competent in particular areas of legal practice, regardless of whether that's something that you're going to go on and specialize in. So your first stage is to focus on that and to pass the exams in that. And then there is opportunity within practice to specialize. If you do the LLM with us, there is the opportunity to have some flexibility about what you study when you do the SQ plus content. And so if you've got particular areas that you're interested in, that might be an opportunity to pick up some of those. But you don't need to know where you're headed before you do the courses. And actually, even if you do know where you're headed and what you want to do,
Yeah.
you don't have very much choice initially. And the point at which you will spread your wings into the things that really kind of interest you will be when you're in legal practice.
Yeah, and the flexibility of this, I think you mentioned it in your presentation. You can take this before or after your QWE, is that right?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Does it make a difference? Obviously, you go and do your 2 years in um as an intern or work experience. Would you recommend to a student to do this beforehand or afterwards? Do you reckon it makes a difference?
Um, you can do either. And when the SRA introduced this regime, the whole purpose was they envisaged that certainly they were envisaging that people would do qualifying work experience before they sat their SQE2 exams. Um, what we're seeing with a lot of law firms is their recruitment process. They don't particularly want to recruit someone who's going to do the 2 years training with them and then they lose them out of the business for a chunk of time while they sit assessments. So they have tended to stick to quite a regimented, we'd prefer to recruit people who are doing their study and doing their exams first, then they come to us and do their 2 years qualifying work experience. So I suppose the answer to that question is really um, what sort of employer are you aiming for in the future? If you know that you're wanting to go to a particular type of law firm, or a city, London city law firm, or a large regional practice or whatever, and typically those firms will recruit and then do it, then that's going to be the better way to do it. If you're somebody that's coming at this in a less um, conventional route, or you've already done some, then you might pick a different route. Um, yeah,
Excellent. Okay, that's fine.
does that answer
Go
the
on, Chloe.
question?
Please go on.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add, I think in my experience, I actually worked for a year as a legal intern for the civil service, and I think that was, I mean, as Hannah was saying, there's so many different ways of doing this, and it's quite a flexible system. But I think having that experience was quite helpful, especially for SQE2, because you do learn quite a lot of skills. And it's skills that are mirrored in SQE2. So I think for me personally, it was helpful.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you try, you try to get as much experience as you can at whatever time you can. And I was lucky enough to have that internship. But again, I don't think that not having any work experience would be negative either. But I think it was helpful for me, and also to apply to law firms after that.
And Chloe, if I can stick with you, you were going to be next anyway. Talk to me about what the next steps are for you. Because obviously you're a current SQE student, doing your level one, level two. When you've completed that, what do you want out of this? What discipline are you looking for? And how easy do you think you will find it to get recruitment and get a job? Or are you planning to do it alone?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and again, different people have different experiences. But as Hannah was saying, there is this, even though it is a little bit more flexible now to have qualifying work experience, I did try and apply for training contracts. And thankfully, I did get one, well, 2 years ago now. So, and the way that it works is that once you get a training contract, usually you have a 2 year period before you start training, because law firms want to make sure that you have finished all your studies, that you have passed all the exams, and then you can start your training contract. And so for me, this means that, that they wanted me to do the LLM course, and they do it in partnership with ULaw. And I did it with other people in my training contract cohort as well. So this is a great way to sort of start to meet the people that you will train with. And so this means that, if everything is fine and if I have passed SQE2, which I really hope I did, I will start my training contract in September this year. So this is sort of what is going to happen for me, and it's in the corporate law field. But then I know a lot of my friends that, because I did the conversion course, and people took different steps after that. So after my conversion course, I applied for jobs and I got the legal internship. And then as I was doing the legal internship, I was also applying to training contracts. But I know a few of my friends that were applying for paralegal positions, which is also a way of gaining qualifying work experience. And that means that you don't necessarily have to go through the training contract route. And as paralegals, they were able to work for quite a while for their firms. And then some firms were happy to allow them some time to prep for SQE 1 and 2 and pass the exams, and even fund this preparation. So yeah, this is sort of a few of the possible routes that people can take.
And I'm going to keep with you one final question because I think it's important to ask. This is not a question someone's asked, but more for myself.
Yeah.
Obviously, the SQE is a fairly new regime in the last few years. Is it everything that you expected? So when you first found out about the regime and you were like, right, I want to go and do the SQE, were there any anomalies in there that you thought, well, I'm not sure about that? Or has it been exactly what is said on the tin? Was it exactly what you were expecting?
That's a good question. I think because it is quite a chunky exam and it's a lot of pressure, people deal with it in different ways, but I personally dealt with it by not thinking about it as much. But I mean, I knew that for SQE1, I knew exactly what was going to happen, just because ULaw was quite good at prepping us for it and just putting us in exam conditions. Something I didn't mention is that when you're prepping for SQE1, you have mocks, so you have 2 sets of mocks throughout the prep time. And so this is an amazing way to sort of have, a mini version of SQE1. We're not going to sit for 2 hours with ULaw, but it is quite helpful to do it. And so I think for SQE1, I was quite confident with what to expect. And there wasn't anything that was particularly new, and the way that the questions are formulated at ULaw were quite similar for SQE1. For SQE2, it is a strange experience, and I think there were a lot of things that I didn't really expect, but not in the way that the exams were formatted, more in the way that we kind of, went into the exam center. So at some points we had to wait for an hour before starting the exams, and this kind of depends on your start time. But this is something that is completely unrelated with ULaw. And in terms of the format of the exams themselves, there wasn't any surprises either, I would say. But I did feel like it was for SQE2 quite a draining experience, because it's a lot of exams that you have to go through in one day. But again, I wouldn't say that I was particularly surprised with both exams.
I think it's high pressure, but that sets you up for the role that you're potentially going to go into. And you're right, people deal with it in very different ways. Chloe,
Yeah.
thank you for your time. I really appreciate that. I really thank you for coming on and sharing your opinion and your expertise on the program as we speak. Hannah, just to wrap things up very quickly, there has been one final question, and then we'll go to just wrap things up. It's what would you recommend my bachelor's degree to be? Obviously, law related. But there will be many students that will be not sure. That's probably the wrong way of putting it, but they could be within a different discipline altogether. It could be agriculture, it could be business, it could be finance related. What would you expect it to be, and what do you need it to be?
So you don't need it to be anything is the first question. So
Yeah,
if you have done a law degree, then you will already have some of that starting academic legal
yeah,
knowledge, and you'll be well on your way for getting the additional knowledge for the SQE exams. You need to do a bit of revision along the way. If you haven't done a law degree, then there are other courses out there that you can do, what we call conversion courses, where you can get the the absolute bare essential legal knowledge in a much shorter time frame. So typically, if you're doing it full time, it might be a sort of a 9-month course where you do all of the core legal knowledge in a short period of time. And there's opportunities to combine that with SQE prep courses as well, so that it leads you straight into SQE 1. There are options out there. And if you haven't done a law degree, that's not a bad thing, because actually you can do a conversion course and you will have all of that FLK knowledge that you need for that first exam taught to you within a short period of time in the run up to that SQE1 exam. So a lot of students that do it that way are then actually very well placed for sitting the SQE1 exams. So it really doesn't matter which way you do it.
Excellent. And just finally to wrap up on, students looking to, take up the regime, when will it start? Will it be September? Will it follow the academic year? And you're looking for September 26th, presumably?
Yeah, I mean, the regime is in place and is on running, and the SRA has SQE1 sittings twice a year. And then we have courses which have different start points to align with those. So we've got September courses full time to prepare you for the January sitting, which will be the next. Well, there's a July sitting, but the next courses that would be starting would be September for January. We have January courses that prepare for July. And we also have part-time courses that do it on a longer run. So you could do a June start to prepare for January, for example, or a January start to prepare for July. So it's all on the website in terms of the different course options we've got and the various start dates.
Excellent. All seems very flexible and understanding as well. So, if anyone has any questions, please reach out to Hannah, the team behind in the background who I've been liaising with. They're a fantastic bunch. They're very open to answering any of your questions. So, please do reach out. Chloe, thank you for giving up your time today. Really appreciate it, and best of luck with all your exams. Hopefully, we can get you in a couple of years' time when you're all passed and you're on to bigger and better things. So best of luck to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Hannah, thank you for giving up your time. We look forward to seeing you again soon. If anyone has any questions at all related to this session, please email webinars@postgradsolutions.com, or you can see on screen just behind Hannah there, ask@law.ac.uk. Thank you for your time. Anyone has any questions, let me know. And if not, we look forward to seeing you in September for the SQE. Take care. Bye bye.